Is most nutrition coaching completely unnecessary? What's up, Active Lifers? Welcome back to the Active Life Podcast. I'm Dr. Sean Pastuch, and I'm joined today by my friend, Sam Miller. Sam is probably your nutrition coach's nutrition coach. His job has parlayed from being the person who helps people eat better, healthier, and live the lives that they want to live, to teaching the coaches of today who are providing real value to their clients how to provide that value to their clients. And on today's podcast, I asked Sam some hard-hitting questions about things like, is most nutrition coaching nonsense? In other words, if we just had regular food and we didn't have aisles and aisles of supermarket choices, would there be a need for nutrition coaches at all? His answer might surprise you. And we dive from that into topics like entrepreneurship, being a leader, personal development, and all of the fallacies that are out there in the world about what it's like to be the person who is in front of the camera, running the company, educating the students, theoretically making the money. I know you're going to really enjoy this podcast. Sam is a man of extremely high integrity, perhaps even higher knowledge, and he shares all of it on the show with you today. Let's get to the show. Sam Miller, welcome to the Active Life Podcast.
I appreciate it, Sean.
I'm excited that you're here. My favorite thing is when I'm able to actually have people in studio, and I know you have family on Long Island.
Yep.
Right, and that's what brought you out here this time through, if I'm not mistaken.
And a show tomorrow in New York City. So
Right,
combo,
right.
I just kind of double dip. So, my dad's 88. So I figure anytime I'm even within like a 2-hour radius, make the trip out and see that. And then I knew that you were out here too. So we were able to coordinate, and it was like a 3-for-1 trifecta trip. So I got all my ducks in a row and feel like it was a mix of strategy and luck. And so that's how I get to sit with you here today.
Well, I think you make a really interesting point there, that the luck in the strategy is that you're keeping your mind open to what opportunities are there where I'm going to be.
Right. And we had connected probably 2-3 years ago at this point, and we're remotely on Zoom, and we've been following each other's stuff. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be out there. Why not try to collaborate some more and, have some conversation. So always kind of just keeping your eyes out for stuff like that.
Well, I'm glad you did. One of the things that we talk about on our podcast fairly often is that at Active Life, we like to stay in our lane, and our lane is not nutrition. And so even with our clients at the flagship, for example, down the block, or our RX clients online, when they have nutrition questions that go beyond basic nutrition questions, we refer almost all of them to Level 10 Coaching and Joelle Cavanero. And Joelle got her nutrition education through you. She sees you as a mentor, right? We're all going to go get lunch after this. And so I appreciate the level of depth that you go into with things and the genuine integrity that you run your business and your education with, where it's really teaching people how to think about nutrition differently as compared to hacks to drop 5 pounds, get a quick result, monetize a client, and then build the business off of that.
Yeah, that's a big problem in our industry right now, is even if you look not only at coaches who are selling an offer, but you also look at even the books and education that are put out, there's usually some type of template, diet, quick fix, something that they're selling at the end, or the education that's provided is just a means. It doesn't really teach you what's going on behind the curtain, or helping you think critically about your own decisions that you make on a daily basis. And you're still kind of operating in this world where you don't understand all the variables. So first and foremost, I think I try to teach people how to critically think about their nutrition and their dietary decisions and understand what goes into achieving success in that arena versus blindly following what worked for someone else. And that's usually what happens, is someone either achieves success personally with their own physique, or they get a handful of client testimonials and some before and after photos, and they say, well, this worked for, Sally, Jane, and Joanne, and Bob, and now we're going to use this with you too. And while success can leave clues in that sense, I think we all have individual health history. We have individual preferences. We have things that we like and dislike. We have different activity levels. And so an individualization component to our nutrition is important for sustainability, just like we might adjust or adapt some stuff related to training. So I'd rather teach someone how to think about approaching their day-to-day and finding something that works within a larger framework, or kind of themes and parallels of like, okay, we all probably need a certain amount of protein, or, we need to get these key nutrients in, but there's also some opportunity where we're coloring between, in between the lines, but maybe you've got a slightly different shade of blue than I do. And, but we both are able to color in the lines doing that and achieve, you know, the outcome that we're looking for. So that's kind of my thought process, is I wanted to approach it in a way where people have an ability after working with me, or the coaches that we mentor, they have that short-term success, but then they can adapt it over the long term, so that if their life changes or they have some sort of, you know, something come up, they have the ability to adapt and move from there.
How much of the need for nutrition education today is purely a result of food propaganda, food marketing, in terms of, like, I don't think about my macros. I don't think about really anything when it comes to eating. And I understand that people might hear that and say, well, you've always been thin. You've always had a metabolism that was fast, and all of these kinds of things. But while that is true, and that is something that I understand I have as a benefit, I also just try to keep food in my house that is beneficial to what I'm trying to achieve physically and metabolically. And so no matter what I go to grab in my house, it has a nutritional value that I want in my body, even the snacks. So how much of people's need to get, like, oh, this nutrition education, that nutrition education, metabolic specificity education, is purely based out of how difficult it is to navigate a grocery store?
Grocery store is big. I think the environment that you mentioned in terms of what you're intentionally cultivating inside your own home is super important, and you likely got that from somewhere. So I think environment inside the home, but also our external environment of when we go places, the food that's available is largely driven by, you know, when you go to a grocery store, it's marketing sell-through purposes. They're not positioning something on the end cap of an aisle because it's good for you. It's because some company paid for it to be there and they need to move product. So some of it is definitely the larger business aspect of the food industry and the marketing associated with it. And there's just been changes in our lifestyle as humans, as far as eating meals at home, preparing our own food, the convenience of being able to go grab fast food. And there are certain foods that are hyper palatable in such a way that we desire, you know, we want to consume more and more of them. They're very calorically dense, but not very micronutrient dense. So that would be a very hard thing. Even 100 years ago, it would have been much harder for us to consume that level of calorie density that wasn't coming from single ingredient whole foods. So we've definitely moved away. So I would say prevalence of foods that are not single ingredient whole foods, which contain what's called basically a whole food matrix. So it has micronutrients, essential amino acids. When I talk about micronutrients, I just mean vitamins and minerals, maybe, you know, essential amino acids basically from protein, maybe other things that help to manage your appetite, like fiber. So we've made a shift.
This is what a single food has, you're saying.
Single ingredient whole food would be something like if you ate just steak,
right.
it's
steak,
like, it's
broccoli,
just steak.
and
a potato is just a potato. A vegetable is usually, or fruit. Like if you have let's use everybody's familiar with a strawberry. Strawberries are full of antioxidants. It's obviously colorful. You get all sorts of different benefits from that. You're getting fiber. It's relatively low calorie. There's water in there. You know, it's pretty manageable from a nutritional perspective. You're getting some added benefits with the calories that are coming in. Now, let's say, so when I go back to North Carolina after this, they're hosting the state fair, you know, in like a week or two. If you go and get like fried dough, there's going to be significantly more calories, but less micronutrient density. Or if you go grab a bag of some processed snack, there's probably less micronutrient density relative to the calories. So when you see multiple ingredients on there, that just means, okay, this is essentially manufactured to taste a certain way and to be sold a certain way, versus that strawberry is just one ingredient. It's just a strawberry, right? So we've moved away from that. And it's not to say that people can't ever have some of those other things. It's just that the majority of our consumption has shifted and the availability of those things has shifted. And we also have to factor in, you know, maybe people aren't keeping those healthy things at home. So to answer your question, I do think a significant percentage, I don't think it's the whole thing, but a big part of it is what happens at the grocery store. But we also have to think about the type of restaurants that are popping up, the type of convenience, what people can order at their fingertips at any given time with that sort of instant gratification around food without any sort of work preparation or anything else or mind to nutrition. So big aspect, environment, convenience, and then I think a shift in human lifestyle overall.
Well, so what I'm hearing you say is let's just say it's 80% because I don't know what the number is.
Yeah, it's an arbitrary percentage, right?
Most of the reason why we need nutrition coaching is actually less for nutrition coaching and more for navigating marketing and convenience and lifestyle. And when I say it's, you wouldn't need to tell somebody a strawberry is better for you than a cookie. Everybody knows that. Nobody is surprised the strawberry is better for them than the cookie. Now, you do have to tell people steak is good for you because there's been a strong marketing push against steak.
Yeah, and whole eggs and all that.
All that kind of stuff, right? Like Larry, who you met earlier today, has this great story he likes to tell about people who eat egg whites. He's like, it would be like if you had a beautiful silver necklace with a huge yellow diamond on the end of it, and you walked to the ocean with it, and you just took that yellow diamond off and you threw it into the water, and you kept the necklace.
Yeah,
that's egg whites. And it's not to say egg whites don't have value, but the point I'm making here is that so much stuff has been sensationalized in such a way that we don't even know which way is up anymore. You have documentaries like The Game Changers. You have people who are lobbying for veganism. You have fake meat that's being marketed as this is better for you than meat. Yeah. And it just strikes me that I believe most of the nutrition coaching that people get is about how to navigate this world in which all of these companies are trying to monetize your attention, your mouth pleasure, and your convenience. When if it weren't for that, we would still look the way we looked 100 years ago. At least that's my thought process. And I'm not minimizing what you do. I think it's really valuable because we are in this world.
We are in that world.
We can want to
go back.
Exactly.
We can't just flip a switch.
Exactly.
I do think a big part is navigating that and just remembering the aspect of, hey, when I go to a grocery store, this is a business too, and I have to be intentional with my decision making. Even I think there are some other aspects, whether it be technology, whether it be changes related to movement, non-exercise activity, exercise, just really so many lifestyle changes. But I do think a big part of a nutrition coach's job is helping someone navigate their current life and also that identity they've created and the choices they've been making, and then help them understand, okay, my current metabolic health is a result of my past choices and lifestyle, and I have the ability to change that if I'm intentional with the decisions that I make. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, some of the more complex things we see are really just maladaptations to someone's previous lifestyle. Now, there's hereditary factors and other things that are a small percentage of it, but a lot of times it's a result of, okay, in this ecosystem of, hyper palatable, hypercaloric foods that lead us to like overshooting the macros that we're not tracking, right? In that world, we do need help navigating it. But I think part of it is understanding, even navigating our own lives and our health history and how to get out of that place once we've been there. So I'd still place a big percentage on it like you. I don't know if it's 80%. I do think it's a huge part and one of the reasons we need nutrition coaches. And I think we need good coaches because there are so many coaches taking those polarizing messages for marketing purposes and creating confusion. So part of it is the business side. It's the, large scale, massive supply chain, it's probably a handful of companies that control pretty much everything. If you go through the the middle aisles of the grocery store, it's like 5 main companies that control all of that. That's probably, at least half of what's going on. And then I think there's also, with social media and everything that we have going on, there are professionals that intentionally take that polarizing message because it draws attention to their platform, and it creates more confusion for the end consumer because they get that quick dopamine hit. They get likes on the post, they get comments, they get people signing up for coaching, largely because they've thrown their hands up and they say, okay, maybe veganism is what I need, versus taking maybe a little bit less of a polarizing approach, or carnivore, or whatever it is that's popular at the given time.
Well, hold on. I was going to take my shirt off, go to the grocery store and buy a steak and tell everybody why oatmeal's bad for them. I shouldn't do that?
No, you don't need to do that. Or you don't need to eat testicles today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What if I dip them in milk first?
Maybe on the next part two of the podcast, we can always go into that.
Well, so Sam, how What I really think is valuable about what you're able to offer to the audience is that you don't coach people on their nutrition en masse. It's not your primary objective. You're looking to help nutrition coaches do a better job for their clients.
Correct.
So when the client out there is listening to this, they can trust that what you're sharing with them is genuine because you're not trying to sell them nutrition coaching.
Correct.
How does the person, not, by the way, not to say that someone who does sell nutrition coaching couldn't be genuine. Joelle's going to be coming on the podcast at the end of the month also, and she's an extremely genuine person. How does somebody sort through when they're looking for, I do need help with my nutrition and my lifestyle selection and all the things that I do? How do they sort through somebody who's really good at marketing and somebody who's actually going to be able to help them? What should they look for?
I'd say be wary of absolutes. So if they don't ever answer with, it depends, or let me learn more about your situation, I think you can learn a lot from someone by the questions they ask. So if you're interested in someone's services, they should want to learn more about you to make sure they can actually help you. If it's just a quick take your money and sign you up no matter what, that would be a red flag to me, because I want someone who's going to do due diligence on their ability to help you and serve you at the highest level. And it's just part of that exploratory intake process of really making sure it's a good fit. When they answer questions in their education, maybe providing some stories or examples, and beyond just taking these polarizing topics and making a 15-second reel or TikTok on it, right? I think depth of content is important, and someone's ability to elaborate on a topic and teach it effectively in a long form message, I think is much more powerful. So if you are, let's say you have a variety of coaches that you're considering working with, look at, is this someone who can go beyond just like bullshitting me for 60 seconds on Instagram? Can they elaborate and provide depth of knowledge on this topic and show mastery over the subject? So I'd say if I had to boil it down to like 3 to 5 things, first thing would be wary of absolutes. Like if they say you can only do this or only do that, or they never answer it, you know, the gray area, if they never go into the gray area, that would concern me. I think someone who can place an emphasis and deliver an effective message through long form content versus just short form. That's not to say all people who do short form, there's nothing wrong. I do short form content too, but look for a deeper message. I think the questions they ask, number 3, when you do reach out and you say, hey, I'm potentially interested in your service, how do they communicate with you? What do they want to learn about you to make sure they can help you? That would be my 3rd thing. And then kind of the 4th and 5th things mixed in there were largely related to, I think, like the how, not just the what they're saying, but how they're saying it, the delivery of the message. And then if I had to have a 5th thing, it would probably be look to see what is their relationship like with other professionals in the industry, and how, you know, what type of connections do they have? Are they somewhat cooperative, and how are they kind of showing up within their space? Those would be my 3 to 5 things I'd probably look for.
I love that you set the parameters. You were like 3 to 5 things, and then you got to 4, and you're like, if I have to do a 5th.
Yeah, I was like, I was thinking through it, and I know we talked about the 3 main ones up front, but I really wanted to give people kind of an extra layer of, because I know that's a huge issue, is people are like, I want to reach out. I'm interested in getting help with my nutrition. How do I know who to trust? So there are a lot of people who may have good marketing and testimonials and maybe even some success stories there. And so it's important to not only look at that, but also a few other things. So as I was always working through, it was like I kept thinking of more stuff. So I wanted to make sure that I shared.
I think you did a great job with them.
Thank you.
What made you want to help people with nutrition?
I think confusion in my own journey, and I either found a lot of misinformation, which I think people can easily do right now with social media.
Did you know it was misinformation when you found it?
I did not at the time.
Okay.
So I thought it was the right information. It was not. Or the good information I found was misapplied for my particular circumstances, meaning if I was a younger, more active individual, maybe the advice for a 45-year-old who's trying to lose his gut and lose some weight is not the best diet for me to follow. So you look at mainstream magazines, if it's all geared towards fat loss, that doesn't mean it's best for where I was at in my journey, but I'm reading something that's supposed to be about health. And I think, well, if that's in the magazine, I should do that, right? So there was some good information, but it was misapplied because I didn't have proper coaching and education. And there was a lot of information that's similar to what we're experiencing today. There's misinformation out there. Now, I think that's gotten worse with some of the social media platforms we have. But even back in the day, you'd have some celebrity on Good Morning Television or talk show. They're talking about some sort of popular thing. And that's been going on even decades ago, whether it was South Beach Diet, Weight Watchers, Atkins, we just have different variations of that now. And then we go through the paleo chapter with CrossFit, and then we move to Whole30, and then you move into what now is veganism, carnivore, et cetera. So we've had cycles of this. I think there are parallels in that. And I also had some family members who went through some health challenges and kind of scary medical conditions earlier on in my life. So a combination of what was happening to the people around me, along with me taking an interest in my own health and having some frustrations along the way, as well as I had a pretty significant head injury that really meant I needed to prioritize things like sleep and good nutrition to make sure that I was having the best quality of life possible, given that was going on. There were just a couple things that went into it, and also noticing I was personal training folks. And in order to get the best results with that training, we needed to also make sure we were doing some good things with the nutrition too. So I think it was what I was seeing personally, what I had lived through my life, and then also professionally, what I had encountered with the folks that I was trying to support with their fitness goals.
What was the head injury?
Head injury, I was snowboarding, and I just had a pretty bad concussion. But concussions can impact your hormonal systems and also your gut, kind of the gut-brain connection as well. And so knowing what I know now, I probably would have paid a lot more attention to gut health and things like that. But for me, it just impacted things like sports and, even your kind of how you feel on a day-to-day basis if you're trying to build muscle and recover optimally and do those things. So that was kind of a short-term thing, but that interest did expand to then allowing me to understand, okay, this is not only just a mechanism of building muscle or losing fat, but nutrition and a healthy lifestyle can go hand in hand with improving a whole bunch of things. That's around the same time I kind of got interested in the endocrine system, physiology, and stuff like that.
And what made you decide that you wanted to, because in the beginning, if I'm not mistaken, you were coaching people on their nutrition.
I was, yeah.
What made you decide to shift from coaching people on their nutrition to coaching people to coach people on their nutrition?
The bulk of my client roster ended up being professionals who either they reached out for help with their nutrition or their fitness, but they started asking me questions about their clients during their check-ins. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like the interest and the demand was there. I just didn't have an offer to service that demand. So I started shifting. And so the bulk of my nutrition coaching roster at the infancy of mentorship was really, I realized I'm kind of providing mentorship in my nutrition coaching and my fitness, and people using those programs, using those teaching strategies, using the way that I approach a lot of the topics. And when there was interest for it, I basically just kind of opened up my calendar and did, some case study troubleshooting with folks who are having a hard time with their clients. And I realized, okay, there's something here. We need to kind of double down on this. Mm-hmm. And then I took an initial sort of pilot program where I started working with professionals. But the program with professionals did not exist until there was a clear need for it. And I had already been coaching people 9 or 10 years before that happened. So I was business to consumer, or had clients who were just regular everyday people or athletes long before we ever had any type of business to business offer or mentorship.
What's the most surprising thing for you that you like about it? Coaching
about what
the coaches.
I do now.
Yeah. Because, I have a very similar story. It was, and I love the way you answered that too, because I want to give you credit for a moment. So often, the answer to that question is just the templated, I just wanted to have more impact. And if I can impact people who can impact people, I get to spread my value. And it's like, yeah, I don't think you're lying, but I think there's more to it. And the way that you answered that, to me, just resonates as very truthful, in a sense that, like, I was doing this thing, this opportunity presented itself. It felt like I was pushing against a headwind to not do it. And when I started doing it, I realized I liked it and I was good at it. And so I doubled down on it.
Yeah, it's a natural progression. And it was something that I almost wish I realized sooner, because it would have made a difference from a business perspective. But because I was so ingrained in coaching clients, I don't think I had the perspective to understand the depth of opportunity that was there. Mm-hmm. It was later through a combination of networking with other coaches and building my professional connections that I realized there might be an opportunity to do something like that. And just looking internally at my own client roster and being like, okay, you kind of joked around before I think it was before we actually hit record that, in one of my bios, I think over the past couple of years, I'll sometimes joke around and put it in there as kind of lightheartedly talking about mentorship as like, hey, 62% chance I coach your coach. And that's because about the time that I switched to mentorship, about 60 to 70% of the clients that were just nutrition clients or fitness clients were coaches. And so and also my mom loves the number 62. So it was like combination of, that was roughly what the percentage was. And I realized the majority of my coaching roster, it's coaches, right? So then that offer was really a natural progression. I do like the idea of the ripple effect. I think as someone who likes to see ideas click for people and then have it play out with their clients and have them apply some of these teachings, what you mentioned about impact, it's not wrong. I think there's some truths to it, and seeing that ripple effect of, cool, if I help 10 people who each have 10 clients, that's more than if I just help 10 clients, right? That's 10 times the impact. But I think in the health and fitness space, the words value and the words impact get thrown around a lot without really any sort of tangible measure of what does that even mean? What impact are we having? Why is that important? And so I've used terms like the ripple effect to kind of explain why that's important. But for me, the shift to professionals was a very natural progression. And I think we were kind of segue into, okay, so what's like my favorite part about working with those professionals? And I don't know if there's one specific thing, but it's probably just helping them feel more confident in showing up for their people and watching those things click and realizing that they have the capability to, yes, have that impact, in air quotes, of whatever meaning they sort of assign to that. But I think coaches, for whatever reason, whether it's a result of other educators in the space or their own need for personal development and trusting themselves, I think confidence in our industry can sometimes be hard to come by. It's either we see folks who there's almost like too much arrogance in some ways and some complexes in the wrong direction, or we have folks who really don't believe in themselves enough to step out and help the clients they need to serve. So I really think giving them the clarity to approach some of these client cases so they can actually help people, super important. Watching them blossom as humans and becoming more confident humans and trusting their capabilities to serve, I think that's also really cool.
Do you feel pressure to keep a certain body composition because you're the nutrition coach to nutrition coaches who are helping people want to achieve a certain body composition? And I ask that because I feel that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I want to be in great shape. So it's not as if it's like hard for me to decide to go work out and to eat real food. But I feel it. I feel if I let myself go, people will assume I don't know how to build education that helps them live the life that they want because I don't look a way that they want to look. And I'm curious if that ever weighs on you.
It does, and I've gone back and forth on it. So in some respects, I do understand when people say your body is your billboard, or especially like when you're in the fitness industry. I also intentionally would steer away from that. So early on, I had the complete misconception that if I went, and I joked about this, we were talking about my event that I hosted over the weekend. I put up a really funny picture from like 2012, and I'm standing in the woods. I got my arms crossed. I'm in really good shape. And I thought that, you take the good pictures, you get in good shape, like that's good for business. And you got to be like an influencer, right? And that's not really it at all. And so I've changed my perspective over time that I think it is how you deliver the information, how you treat people. Yes, you need to lead by example and prioritize the things you're talking about. You may not be 4% body fat year round, but I think it would be contradictory to talk about those things and not apply it. So, it's like the Vince Lombardi quote of like leading by example is not, the best way to lead. It's the only way to lead. And so I personally place an emphasis on it. I prioritize it. It's important to me. And I do feel like I prefer to look a certain way, but it is a little heavy. And I could see where someone might say, okay, well, there are other aspects to your professionalism that play into it. But I think if we're not prioritizing that ourselves, it sends a mixed message. So to me, the most important thing is, am I I don't want to be asking people. I used to think about this with my clients too, with nutrition clients. It's like I never should be asking them to do something that I would not do myself. So that's first and foremost. And then for these coaches, I shouldn't be telling them to do something with their clients that I would not do with my clients or that I would not do myself. So as long as I'm able to be applying these concepts, at least the ones that are most relevant to me in my health journey, I'm being a leader in some capacity, right? And there's a lot of different definitions of that, and applying myself to a standard that, the standard that I've created and can uphold. I think that's the most important thing. The exact body composition percentage, the amount I can lift, how I look exactly in a photograph, maybe, that's up for debate, but I do think some level of prioritization, leading by example, and taking, you kind of have to practice what you preach is just like the general, to me, that's the most important part. Practice what you preach, but your exact body composition probably doesn't matter as much. But if you're telling someone to do something, I would really hope that you are representing that in some capacity through your own life.
You recently hosted an event for nutrition coaching professionals. And when you and I talked about it on the walk we went on prior to this podcast, what we were discussing was something that I see coming up constantly. And that is that the event was incredibly impactful for them, not because of the reason they thought they were going to get impacted. They come to a nutrition coaching event expecting to get tips and tricks and tactics on nutrition coaching. But they came and they got resonant stories from other people who have walked the walk that they are attempting to walk right now, that both validated where they are at, added commonality to their story, and gave them inspiration to what's possible for them. And one of the biggest things that we talked about was consistency. And I imagine one of the things I always find interesting is when there are parallels to multiple avenues of life, that no matter what, there isn't an it depends. This works. And consistency is one of those things. I would love to hear you talk about that in terms of how consistency is something that you teach to the people who you teach.
So obviously nutrition and consistency, that's the most obvious example, right? Or fitness and consistency. Everybody talks about, okay, we've got to show up, we've got to do the reps, we've got to, continue to do it in that avenue. But this event was going beyond just the consistency with nutrition and really talking about, for these coaches, consistency in their business practices, and really just the nature of the compound effect of, you make these daily deposits, and all too often people get 80 or 90% of the way there, and it is hard and it's difficult and trying, and there's ups and downs, peaks and valleys, but they'll quit like right before the compounding really manifests into something powerful. And so even though speakers were from all different walks of life, different avenues, as you mentioned, some have written books, others are more speakers, educators in men's health, people who have chosen to segue from fitness more into personal development or improving other aspects of your life. And everyone had a parallel to that story and the importance of consistency, because I think it was, I heard this on a podcast recently. It's like, one of the ways that you can predict success and failure is just, if you're mediocre in terms of your consistency, that almost guarantees that you won't be successful, but consistency is a prerequisite to be successful. And the reason I think that's so important is, if you're not making those daily deposits over time, time can't do its thing. Time plays a role in almost every aspect, whether we look at math or science or whatever, there's time is in the equation somewhere. And then when we apply that to health and fitness, but also business, time is just this powerful compounding tool, but time can only do its thing if you're doing the work while the time is elapsing, right? It allows you to play this longer time horizon. So consistency came up a number of different times in a number of different ways, whether it was something as simple as being consistent in sharing your message and showing up in your content, right? People will show up for you when you show up for them. If you don't show up first, why are these people going to show up for you? So consistency with your content. We talked about consistency in sort of navigating business and life. Sometimes you have to create your own consistency through creating your own certainty and self-trust and being able to manage some of the variables that are around you. And then consistency also in how they're approaching things related to their clients and business, and understanding that revenue isn't the only indicator of that consistency, but there's other lagging feedback and KPIs that they should be looking at that tie back to business performance, and really that where they are maybe a byproduct of 60 days ago, 90 days ago, 120 days ago. And so consistency isn't just what you see in a Stripe account. It's actually more important to look at other metrics that are predictors of that marker, right? And other behaviors that they need to be engaged in. So that was definitely really big from that perspective. And then also, them continuing to kind of invest in themselves and show up and participate in events like that, right? Because sometimes people will go and then they have that momentary, boost in motivation and mood, and then they stop showing up for things like that, right? So consistency was really applied across a number of different domains, whether it was related to their clients, whether it was related to their business, their marketing, and also their personal life.
What did they think they were coming for?
So definitely to, hear from some of these powerful individuals and speakers and learn from their stories. But I think some folks were probably expecting more nutrition tactics or things that they're doing inside their business or specific strategies. And we did have a few things come up that were certainly related to that. But I intentionally left it vague, knowing that sometimes you approach a weekend like the one that we had, and it's kind of like a good chef can kind of situationally make determinations about a recipe as they're in the kitchen and they see how things are coming together. You may have your set recipe, right? But I didn't go in with a level of rigidity and structure to impose my will on the exact, what everybody was going to say. And this presentation, we have to have this, and these slides are going to say that. I was like, no, we're not doing that. So I avoided slides. I didn't want death by PowerPoint. I didn't want a fire hose of knowledge to the face. And our program is largely a lot of education and a lot of, spending time in the trenches with your clients. So I wanted the weekend to be about the coaches, not the speakers, not the information on a PowerPoint, but about the people in the room. And I think in order to do that, we had to go in with a little bit of like, this is an intention that we have, and we're going to bring people aligned with that intention. And then we're just going to let magic happen from there. So I really didn't have a incredibly detailed structure of we're doing that. I sent the speakers maybe a handful of questions. I was like, this is generally what we're going to be talking about. Other than that, it was stuff happened on stage I didn't plan. There were things that, came out or didn't come out, that were or were not discussed. It was, I think the lack of rigidity allowed it to really blossom into something special. And following more the energy of the weekend, the people I knew who would be in attendance, and having just a really strong sort of placing deliberate effort more on who was in the room and how we were delivering things versus the what of like the content and the message that came out.
What did Allie Gilbert do on stage that wasn't expected?
So Allie talked about how one of the sponsors for her Silverback Summit is a company that has sex toys and things like that. So that was more the unexpected.
Yeah.
And then there were some other,
you can count on her for the unexpected.
Yeah. And there were some other things too, some more, emotional moments and things like that were maybe unexpected, some funny unexpected. And then there were some things that we did generally expect, right? Like people sharing their experiences writing books or building their flagship offer and programs, or their experience having a hard time in the fitness industry or being at rock bottom. And how do we work from there? So a mix of expected and unexpected, and Allie's always a good character for that.
There's this interesting paradox, especially in business. Well, it's especially obvious in business because there is technically a scoreboard, right? The money that's coming into the account, the new leads that are coming into, all that kind of stuff can be measured, even if a lot of the lagging indicator or the leading indicators cannot be measured, like client satisfaction is harder to measure. Referability is harder to measure. You can measure them, but you're being subjective with your measurement. And one of the things that we were talking about when it came to consistency earlier is people get 90% of the way there, and the difference between them and the person who has gotten all the way there is the person who got all the way there just continued.
Right. Just didn't give up.
The paradox is that one of the most commonly used words in business vernacular is pivot, and being ready to make changes when changes present themselves as being necessary. And I remember trying to develop a business and wondering, am I just supposed to be consistent with this, or am I supposed to pivot here? I remember it because it was last month, and it was the month before that, and the month before that. And it was every month I've been in business in my entire life. How does somebody know, or how do you know? Let's just ask you for yourself. When is it time to be consistent with the thing? And when is it time to recognize that the thing needs a 1 degree change or a 180 change?
So I may not be the person to ask about the 180 change. I tend to be a little bit more of a day-to-day guy. I'm a let's iterate, let's tweak, let's fine tune. And so we're constantly making some change, but the core focus does not change. So I think that's the difference when people talk about pivot points or productivity pivots or different things that they're doing. It's not a excuse to be non-committal to a certain initiative. Mm-hmm. It's really more, I have this main initiative, I have this main focus. Pivots are really more micro adjustments along the way, or at least that's what I've found. And when I look around at my peers who have either been entrepreneurs or small business owners of some kind in a variety of industries, not just fitness, the people who have made it or are on their way to doing something really cool, or at least have survived, they're still alive, they're still in the game. Mm-hmm. And this is where, there's some prominent speakers right now who talk about like, business is not a finite game. It's just the goal is just to stay alive, mm-hmm. just to and obviously be successful.
Let time do its thing.
But you have to let time do its thing. But in my experience, it's been more, let's iterate on this idea. Let's fine tune this. How does this feedback apply to what we're currently working on? Are we doing this to the best of our ability? Are we lagging over here? What metrics do we have to sort of substantiate that? How could we do this better? And asking those questions. It hasn't been, okay, we're over here, we're going to juke over here and put this new thing out and do something completely different. Mm-hmm. It's really been a natural evolution and progression where the tweaks and pivots are really more like a progression than an actual 180-degree change. And maybe I could be doing that wrong. Maybe there are opportunities that I could jump on some golden nugget that I see, but I understand that there will always be ideas and there will always be opportunities. And partially as you become more successful, it's saying no to certain opportunities and maintaining your focus on the thing that got you to where you are and allowing that to still build and compound and let time do its thing versus, oh, here's this cool idea over here. You're planting a new seed versus maybe you've planted the thing that you're doing right now. Maybe you planted those seeds 10 years ago. I mean, there's still the fact that we're sitting here today is probably from something years ago that is just now coming to fruition. Mm-hmm. And we had to just stay in the game and just like continue to do our thing. And had we just been switching, or I decided, hey, I'm going to do this metabolism app, or I'm going to come out with a snack bar or something, I wouldn't probably be here with you today. And there'd probably be a lot more bumps in the road. So I view pivots more like modifications and improvements versus I'm going to drastically change what it is that I'm working on a day-to-day basis.
So is this the part of the show where you drop that you're releasing a snack and an app? Is this what
No, I'm not doing that.
Okay,
so there's
okay.
Nothing.
I wanted to give you the platform. If
yeah,
you
of
were
course,
doing
of course. No, I'm staying with our main thing, keeping the main thing the main thing.
I have a philosophy, and I'm curious your take on it. The number of times I've heard people talk about 90% of small businesses go out within the first 5 years. Most people who are entrepreneurial fail and end up getting a job working for like all that kind of like the failure porn.
Yeah.
Right. And you see it online, like, especially if you're in business circles, you're seeing online people who are talking about how unlikely it is for the proverbial you to be successful. And my theory is that that's bullshit. My theory is that while those numbers are true and statistics can't be denied, I'm on my 9th and 10th business right now. Active Life, the corporate is the 9th, and Active Life, the flagship down the block, is the 10th. I count as somebody who failed 8 times, but they don't, 7 technically, but they don't look at me as somebody who failed 7 times. They look at that as 8 entrepreneurs failed.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying there?
Right.
And so it's like I'm not 1 in 10. I'm 1 in 1 who kept on figuring out what not to do over a long enough time horizon. And then the other part of that is I believe that if you're somebody who is going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur if you're committed to being an entrepreneur. But there are people who dabble in entrepreneurship because it seems cool. It seems like the in thing to do right now. I don't want a boss. I'm going to be my own founder, all that. And I think that's because we've sensationalized how amazing it is to own your own company, as if there aren't a set of problems that come from that some people just frankly will not enjoy. Right. And I'm curious where you sit on the spectrum of those thought processes.
First of all, I want to acknowledge you asking amazing questions today. So I do a lot of these interviews, and sometimes the questions are not this caliber. So I really appreciate that. It makes it a lot more fun for me to be here. So
I appreciate
just kind of give Sean a shout out. So if you're watching this, it makes it a lot better that Sean thinks of these questions. I actually had this conversation yesterday.
Interesting.
So there's a member.
We didn't plan this, by the way, for you guys.
So I had this conversation yesterday about how entrepreneurship is sensationalized, and I didn't get so much into the iterations of my business of whether it's nutrition coaching, personal training, and where we've been today. I don't know that I would technically be on my 9th or 10th thing, but arguably I had some jobs and side hustles that contributed to the main thing right now, which is still the main thing. And I've stayed within the industry. So maybe, if we look back at kind of the previous segment and last question that was asked, a big part of that was staying the course within maybe your skill set and your expertise. As far as the statistics you mentioned and the failure rates and what's popularized, I do think the data is skewed for a number of reasons. There are people with almost I would call it a high level of distractibility and shiny object syndrome. Mm-hmm. And the reason the business fails is because they just simply jump to another opportunity. They think the grass is greener, and they didn't technically quit entrepreneurship. They think they're a serial entrepreneur, but they're not. They're just distracted. And that skews the statistic. And then I think you are someone who stayed in the game and used failure as feedback to build. Really, arguably, each time you build back better and you build something more significant, meaningful, and impactful than what you did before, because you have the skills from the previous 7 things you did to do what you're doing now. And it's still within the same industry. It's just within different sort of layers of your audience, and maybe the offer changed. Mm-hmm. I don't view an offer change or moving into a slightly different presentation of the offer as a business failed. To me, that's you found a better way to do things within your core competency and expertise that Sean has. Mm-hmm. I don't view those failures. So I do agree the statistics are skewed. I think people are sensationalizing entrepreneurship and remote work and time freedom and all of those things. And the conversation I had yesterday is someone was talking to me about how they actually admired some of the speakers that we had this past weekend. And I asked them, well, why is that important? They reference these individuals as authority figures, right? So I asked, okay, what about them makes them an authority to you? Why do you respect them? What is attractive about what they were doing? And he's like, well, I don't really need their audience. I don't need the big following. I don't need that level of notoriety. I want stability and I want freedom of my time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you realize there are a lot of ways and a lot of jobs that can provide you autonomy without being an entrepreneur. And there are things that are far more stable and if you are a risk-averse individual, entrepreneurship is probably not your cup of tea. Mm-hmm. And so having that conversation with him, we have to peel back the layers of why do we desire the idea, this thing that's been painted online of small business ownership or entrepreneurship, and it's because of, I think it's a number of different things. It's the way the data is presented. It's the way certain social media accounts operate, people, renting nice cars and private jets to take photos. It blows
me away that people do that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But, I told, especially for, this person's a little bit younger than me too. And I said, there are folks around you who are very successful at your age, and that's wonderful. That's fantastic. I'm so happy for them that they've achieved that. Like, root for them, support those people. But there are also a lot of people that are just projecting an image that they want you to see, and basically they want you to have certain beliefs about them or their brand that may or may not be true. It's just they're doing a very good job of manufacturing some degree of celebrity importance or financial success that may not be entirely true. And so you want to be open-minded that maybe this person is doing great, but also a level of skepticism to say, okay, understand, how does this apply to me? And that shouldn't discourage me or overly encourage me in my path and the things that I'm doing. And so I think there are some aspects of entrepreneurship that have been sensationalized. I do agree that the failure rates and statistics are probably overblown in a number of ways, because half the people contributing to that statistic are just distracted, and then half of the people maybe in the game, they've just iterated off of their first idea, and by the statistics for the Better Business Bureau or whoever puts that together, it's like they changed their LLC or something, right? But the same founder is still in the game. So I would agree that is flawed. And I think a lot of people are really just looking for autonomy, a little bit of freedom in what they do, having a level of contribution or significance. I think humans want to feel significant. It's associated with our self-esteem and self-belief. So I think that's important. But I think far too many people think that owning a business is the vehicle to do that, and it doesn't need to be.
When you talk about people wanting to be entrepreneurs for the sake of, like, because of what they're told is awesome, it's something that I struggle with in threading the needle on my content, because I love being an entrepreneur. I love it. And I want to talk about all the benefits of it. And I want to talk about all the difficulties of it. And I want to give people permission at the same time to not resonate with that and still decide to listen and follow my content, because I also understand the benefit of being an employee at a company that values great employees. You know, the way I see it, my primary job as the CEO at Active Life is to create a safe and inspiring work environment in which our clients and our team can pursue a mutually shared mission. That's my job. If I've done that, I can get out of the way and let the people I hired to do the things that they do better than I do, which is what got them hired. And I think that if you can find a company that has leadership like that, and I'm definitely putting myself on a pedestal here, and it is what it is. A leader, a business that values culture, that values you get to be all of you working there. You don't have to suppress who you are. You don't have to worry about getting a text message at 10 o'clock at night that something needs to be done, because that's within the values.
100%. And I sometimes am envious of my just to rattle it off, let's say you have a number of team members. Sometimes it's really good to be the number 2 person or number 3. And I don't mean in terms of income, but just maybe in terms of the order you were hired in the organization, or the number 7 person.
Right.
There's benefits to that in that you have less risk. You don't bear all of the responsibility. The buck doesn't stop with you. When things go well, you get credit, but also when things go poorly, it's probably not all your fault. There's really a lot of benefits to being in an organization that values people and lets people be who they are, but you're also not under the microscope of, you and I go on social media, we post things, it becomes Sean is the problem, or Sam is the problem, or the way that we do things is the problem. If you're behind one of us per se, at the end of the day, if something's going well, cool, like we're all going to benefit from that. But if there's some sort of scrutiny in some way, it really falls on the founder, on the CEO. And so, yes, I do think entrepreneurship is glamorized, but I also view it as a very powerful vehicle for personal development, professional development,
100%.
And you can change people and communities through effective entrepreneurship. And when people talk about impact in the health and fitness industry, I think we see people throwing that term around, and it's, yes, the end user of the fat loss or the body composition or you gain muscle, you came back from an injury, or what, a lot of the things that we talk about, when in reality, there's also an opportunity for the health professionals to get involved with organizations that are, yes, helping that end user, but then that person has the ability through their personal and professional development and financial development to have an economic impact in their area. So I see the trickle down of that in a variety of ways when we develop ourselves, or looking at your brand or my brand, or anyone, we talked about Joelle, right? Like, it's really cool that, let's use her as an example to take us out of it, so we're not putting anyone on a pedestal.
No, listen, I'm great.
Yeah.
You're great.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. So like when you have assistant coaches, or you have an operations staff, or you have other things, that's very cool in that they have probably more freedom than they would have at another job or sitting in a cubicle, and they're doing something they're passionate about. They do bear less risk, and they do have other opportunities to be involved in such a way that I think is unlike any other job opportunity. So I think people miss that sometimes, is like, I don't need to be an entrepreneur to be a successful health and fitness professional or nutrition professional. I can do that in a lot of ways. It just may not be the traditional clinical setting that someone envisioned when they had a day job, right? It's more, you have to find the right people and get on that bus and make contributions to where they're headed.
And I think one of the things that I respect about you is when you see in somebody, you've come through this education, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. You don't even want to be an entrepreneur. You were just sold this bill of goods that you should be. I'm going to help you get a job. You tap into your own network and you make introductions that afford people the opportunity to get a job that fulfills what they want to do with their life. We do the same thing at Active Life. In fact, right now, our biggest push is creating a network of people who are looking to hire the absolute best, no question about it. It's undeniable the results that they're able to get after going through 13 months, 1,000 hours of education with a mentor, results for their clients in the health and fitness space. We are looking for people to place our students with until we have enough flagship locations that we can just start hiring all of them. You do the same thing. And I want to make sure to call that out, because I believe that adds value to the education that you provide to your students. It doesn't end at this transactional agreement. You paid me to teach you how to help somebody with their metabolism and their food intake. That is what you paid me for. But my job, speaking as you, is to make sure that you are able to leverage that education into the life that you say you wanted to get the education to live. You didn't pay me for that, but that's unexpected value that I know you're looking to provide to all of your students when it's appropriate. And I want to call that, because I want people to know that that's who you are. What I want to end the show on is I want to make sure that people know how they can, like, where should they be looking for Sam Miller content that lets them know this is a legit guy. This is somebody I want to be following, and I may want to get involved in what he's teaching.
For sure. And I do think part of the placement aspect too is, like, we both realize the need for that. And I think if someone does want to start their own business, we're going to be rooting for you, right? Like, if you want to do that, let's help you. But if that's not working out, or you realize that maybe your skill set lies in a different area, that's okay. And I think the entrepreneurship conversation we had was super important earlier. As far as for people wanting to learn more about what I do and understand my message and kind of what I'm about, all of our resources are just primarily start with the Sam Miller Science brand. So sammillerscience.com, and my podcast is my main place for long form content and learning more about what we do. I also have a book called Metabolism Made Simple, which, it's hard to kind of bullshit like 200 pages of a book. So hopefully you guys get an idea from there. And our program, if you want to learn about our flagship program for coaches, you can find that at metabolismschool.com.
Okay. So your podcast, is that nutrition education, or is
correct?
Okay. So
largely nutrition education, along with a mix of, I talk about kind of this concept of food for thought, right? It might be about the industry, it might be about them as professionals, but we focus a lot on nutrition, physiology, metabolism, gut health, different aspects of the science of things, but we do get into conversations around the profession, and we do largely, it's a quick hitting solo episode that's going to educate you on a topic. I try to take out the long-winded 3-hour, here's the research, and bring it to you in a digestible format so that you can translate those complex concepts for your clients. That's how the podcast works primarily. And I've used that just to kind of deliver some of this information that in the industry really tends to seem overwhelming at times, and just try to distill that down into more digestible nuggets.
Outstanding. Sam Miller, thank you for joining us on the Active Life Podcast.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Turn pro. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life Podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn pro.